Today's episode is supported by the Kranzberg Arts Foundation. The Kranzberg Arts Foundation provides essential infrastructure and venues for creatives to thrive in St. Louis because the soul of a city is shaped by its arts. Go to kranzbergartsfoundation.org to explore some of St. Louis's finest dance, art, music, and more in the amazing Grand Center neighborhood. Now, here's Coach Jen with today's Soccer Mom Sunday.
I'm just waiting so I can identify. Good morning.
Oh, that's good.
Okay. Oh, whoa. Good morning.
You gotta keep up here.
Okay, wake up.
Come on, soccer mom.
I need to be on a second coffee usually by Sunday mornings because I'm back to playing soccer again on Sundays, and I don't like anything in the morning, so I don't know why I agreed to do this.
Were those copas dry rotted?
They're fine.
Dude, were all the studs on the bottom?
Yeah. I mean, they've got some. And then, the very part of your toe where it starts to pull away. I'm like, I could probably hot glue that or Gorilla Glue, whatever you do.
I say that. I still have my Kings. I got an old pair of black on black.
But I did use grip socks. I stole Liam's grip socks and because I bought them. It was a pack of 3.
What does he own that you didn't buy?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I put them on, and they're amazing. If I would have had grip socks back in the day, I don't think I would have gotten blisters. They were awesome. I got an assist.
Polyester socks and some...
I got an assist, and I didn't get hurt.
What is it? We would use electrical tape. We wouldn't even do the white athletic tape. Just so we could get a different color on there.
You're a nerd.
I'm not a nerd. We were utilitarians is what we were. We are also poor. So
yes, that's true.
But we had a buddy. Literally had a friend on the team that his dad was an electrician. So we would snag it. Okay,
so here's a key question, at least for me when I had copas, at least when I was younger. Well, not even copas, whatever Dad would buy. When your shoelaces were too long, did you triple knot them or did you wrap them around your foot?
No. My dad smoked. We would cut them and then he would burn the ends.
Okay.
You county kids.
We would wrap them around and then you tie them on. You'd wrap them around the arch.
No, you remember that electrician I told you about? We would do the shrink wrap.
Okay.
Cut them and shrink wrap.
So I haven't even said Jen Siess, JV Anderson here for Soccer Mom Sunday. Not at a pub.
No.
We're somewhere new.
No,
where are we? Can you tell me? I just followed GPS.
No, we got new digs.
New digs.
Kranzberg Arts Foundation, who helps support the Soccer Dad Pod. It's kind enough to work a little deal with me, and we took a space. We're over here on the second floor. I don't know. What do you think? First time here. You tell me.
I love the space. The building's beautiful. The space is got potential. I mean, I foresee a rug, like to, soak up some sound. I've probably got some extra furniture we can put in here.
Yeah,
I see big screens. I see
kegerator.
Yes, and we need a fridge with beverages.
It's en route because we got Jared over on the flip side. That's the first thing.
I still have an old college refrigerator. The little refrigerators that you would put in your room. I still have that. I think it works.
Yeah, those are. They fit 38 beers.
Okay, that I didn't know. Oh my God.
No, it's cool. I like it down here because we're going to be able to we're a little closer to all the action, not only city-wise, training-wise. I mean, for us, we're close because you're.
It's not hard to get to.
No, it's great.
15, 20 minutes.
Grand Center. So looking out the window, I can see Fox Theater roof, Angad Hotel, Urban Chestnut Brewing.
Yeah.
Those are our good buddies.
I like it. So what's going on in your world? Because I think you've been traveling with Beckett.
Oh my God! Well,
you got up for a 5:30 a.m. training that he asked you to do. Look at you, super dad.
It's funny because it's like I'm an early riser anyway.
I don't like AMs.
And it's funny through the process of these shows, really try to heed the advice that is gathered from the conversations and be a little chill, be growth mindset, don't be that dad, don't whatever. And so living through that process, and Beckett's he's a motivated individual. And a couple of years ago he really he would get up at the crack of dawn, and that was his thing. He was gonna figure out his path and do it, and he still does it today. So when he did that the other day, it's, I don't know, it was like 5:30 and the doors creaking open.
You took good pictures. They were like misty morning.
Well, we got out there.
Fogs out.
He's out there like, I just want to get touches, and I'm like the photographer, and he's like, oh my God, look at the fog. So no, we went out. Soccer park's 5 minutes from the house, and got some early mornings in, and I don't know, it's one of those things. You just, if they ask to do the extra, do the extra. If they don't do it on their own, don't beat them up because of it.
Well, that was my question when I saw your post. Besides being like, oh, like I would roll over and be like, get your dad.
Well, I was really more like, don't wake up your mom.
Yeah,
she'll kill you.
Yeah, that's right. That's our house too. Don't even talk to me. How important is that it's kid driven, right? We have a lot of kids that go to a lot of practices and do a lot of training. And I can't say I've never tried to be like, hey, I haven't seen you get out there and touch on the ball. I have 4, so it could be any one of them. I think he drives that, right?
Yeah, I think it's well in excess of 90%.
Wow.
Like when you look at the kids, like, and I don't care whether it's them on the field with their teams or with friends going to kick around, or they do the early mornings by themselves. They have to be able to do it by themselves, in my opinion. But again, they're still kids.
Yeah.
And even pros have a team, right? They've got their agent, they have an attorney, they've got a mental coach, all this stuff. So those gaps are filled by people that are there to support them. So that's kind of how I look at it. Like, look, we're going to keep the fridge filled with the food that you need / want / like, and then all the extra, hey, we want to get out and get touches. Like, you're not going to get that time back anyway.
Yeah.
You know that. Like, you and George, you guys spend so much time with the littles. If they want to go play.
Right. Yeah, but just like that's what just struck me is I used to, when I was coaching, I would sometimes get a little, not that I have never been a parent on the sideline that's been a little active, but you see sometimes parents that are...
Wait. Is active code for lippy?
No.
Supportive?
No, support. It depends on what you say. It depends on... sometimes I want to embarrass them, so like with Mara, and I'll be like, let's go, Mo. They call her Mo, and she looks over and she rolls her eyes. She's like, Mom, stop. But no, I don't yell at referees. I would yell occasionally at a referee as a coach, not as a parent, but more like let's go or whatever, or just to embarrass them for just a quick moment.
I've really reverted to trying to take...
You go hide in a corner.
I go to 0. It's kind of like my goal, because what does it really matter? I mean, look, if you're going to cheer a moment in time, oh, that was awesome, clap, yeah, well done, blah, that's one thing, right? But to comment or suggest or
like to cook, like so I've been in where it's not always the loud ones, right? Sometimes the quiet parents, the ones who are coaching quietly.
Oh, who it is. Watch the kids, because the kids will make a play. And the ball will be going to the right, and they'll turn around all the way to the left and stare at the parents, and like waiting for affirmation or fear.
Or I'm like, why did we just talked about the fact that we're not going to quote boot the ball up the field, and my sweet girl, you just did that, and I look and I go, that came from Dad. So it's in sometimes also, I'm not saying that you shouldn't get pumped up on the sideline, because that's fun and the energy is fun. But if you're burning more calories than your kid you can't will them in. You're doing it wrong. Like, they have to be the ones working hard. They have to be the ones finding. You can give my 8-year-old looks over at Mom and Dad, and we give her away. But other than that, I mean, I can't tell her to work hard. I mean, I can, but that doesn't help. She's got to go work hard.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a 60-minute game. It's a 90-minute game, whatever it is, at whatever age.
Or it's 7v7 and there's no offside. Just
just enjoy it for the 45 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever it is. And then after the fact, if they ask, then talk about it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just the kids get stressed out and it's not fun.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I walk away, because it's like I'm listening to these other parents and like, that they have, quote, good intentions,
sure,
but it's really self-directed. They look at the kids and, we've used this analogy in the past. It is about the last name on the back of the jersey that matters more to most parents than the kid's first name and who they are, because it's like a reflection of them. Oh, that's Anderson, or that's...
Yeah, you can see sometimes parents they get a little bit more relaxed when their kid scores. So they do something, it's like, okay. And it's like, it's not about you, and it's not about even your kid, because this is a team sport.
How about if they walk off the field and they're smiling? Hey, win.
Right.
That's a win.
Yeah.
What's the score? I don't know. They're happy.
And by the way, you don't. That's what the.
I mean,
things-
we know, but
you do
we
not,
don't want to talk about it.
You do not have to ask kids who won. You don't have to. You don't. I try not to ever. They'll tell me if they scored or they did something great. Like they'll tell me those results questions. You don't have to ask. It's did you have fun? Did you work hard? Did you try that move coach wanted you to do? Whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I think it's a balance too of making sure that the kid has a balance of drive, determination, focus.
Did you only eat Doritos today? Because that's what it looks like.
but I like when they're also a little self-deprecating and they're aware of the situation,
Yeah.
and maybe they're empathetic to another player on the team that's coming on that's having a bad day or whatever. That they're aware of that.
And
you can see that. You can see how those kids engage.
So important.
So anyway.
Anyhow.
Yeah, now that we've figured it all out, we should probably bring on the guest.
Yes, it's time. I saw you do the point.
He's like,
this
wait a
is
second,
time.
we're kind of answering all the questions.
So I've been really excited. 2 months ago, I think it was, I inserted myself into being, the Missouri Historical Society did a Women in Soccer, and then like a couple of weeks later, they did something with the men's side, and I reached out and I was like, hey, I didn't see that you have a moderator. And I didn't tell them I'd never moderated. And I was like, I'll do it. And I saw the names on the list, and Lori Kolupny, I had a chance to interview her. Lindsay Kennedy Eversmeyer, I see all the time. Katie Shields, we've had on the show, and she's been on KMOX. But there was a name, I'm like, I don't know this person, and I would really like to get to know this person. Megan McCormick, Academy coach at City. Thanks for joining us here and hearing
so
us
happy to be
bullshit
What's
at the
up?
beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, so go ahead and take the next 60 seconds to completely deconstruct everything that we said.
She's like, it's all
Yeah,
wrong.
just bury it.
Don't do it.
It's all good. Just whatever they said, ignore that.
And what I really loved is, of course, JB's going to roll his eyes. Anything where we've got women more in the industry, whatever industry, whether it's coaching, whether it's broadcast.
Wait. Why would I roll my eyes? I don't know.
Because you know that I
was the one that-
I carry the flag, and I'm like, yes.
You are that parent.
No, not parent. I'm that woman.
Oh, that's what I meant to say. Sorry. No. Go ahead.
I got on Twitter I posted some other dipshit something to a broadcaster, because being a woman, that annoys me.
Let's bring that up right now. I think
Sure.
you're shaking your head. Yes. Are you familiar with what we're talking?
Is this the Caitlin Clark?
Well, there's one Caitlin Clark. There's a new one.
What was the basketball player?
He's a jerk.
Jay Brain.
Okay, I did see this. Yeah, it may have been your post.
It
this
probably
morning
was.
that I
'Cause I
saw.
was fired. I couldn't go to sleep, and I'm like, listen, listen. And I don't know that it was she. The story goes that whoever this is, I don't even know who he is. Whoever this is, guy, you're sitting there. This is how media works. You either have a formal press conference where you're all sitting in chairs, right, and you wait and the mic gets passed around, or you stand up, and that's what was the Caitlin Clark. Well, that was a formal press conference. Or you have like an informal where it's like, hey, Klaus is going to come over, or coach is going to come over, and it's like a Tuesday, and that audio or video doesn't go to the public unless media takes it there.
Right.
But if you're there, you're invited, and so unless you do something that gets your butt kicked out, which people don't, you have every right to put the mic there, and those are the rules. And so him dismissing her, and I don't know if it had anything to do with her being a female reporter, but him to be honestly a jackface and be like, "Do you subscribe to my podcast?" And then to her to be like, "No, I don't think so," because she wasn't thinking that, and him to be like, "Well, then you can't ask me any questions." What? First of all, and that we are not going to. The comments were like, and look at her try to sneak her microphone. I'm like, no, that's the job. She was doing her
Right.
job. She had and then the third thing that pissed me off, see, I told you, then I get on a rant. Third thing that pissed me off is that everybody just continued like nothing happened. I'm like, whoa, well, where are we as a media? You were just all dissed. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So let's zoom out, because I want to get your opinion on this.
Yeah.
I'm going to drink my coffee.
And I'm not defending him at all, but what I'd like to do is just paint the broader picture. He plays for the Philadelphia 76ers, right? They played last night. They played the Knicks, I believe. They lost. It's the playoffs. They lost. He, got.
I get it.
heated
You're a little
in the game.
saucy. You're mad. You get mad. That
Right. So, and I saw your post.
No.
I don't know. What's your take whenever athletes lose at high levels?
Yeah.
And have that anxiety and that irritation? And these are arguably, not arguably, they are the most competitive people in the world, given the fact that they're all at this level. Do you ever give them leeway whenever they do stupid shit in the moment after big games?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question. It's always interesting, and like the Olympics is another one that comes to mind, like those moments that, and in any case, like someone's been training maybe their whole life or their whole career for this singular moment. And then it maybe doesn't go their way, or to your point, they lose or something happens and you see it all the time in soccer too, with like, if it's a referee decision or it's just a result or whatever the case is. And, certainly people say things that they might not otherwise in a different situation. I think I would also say it's part of the job. Like, I think that to be granted some leeway maybe makes sense, but to what degree I think is important to think about, because these are also people that in most cases are making millions of dollars a year to sit in that press conference and answer that question when they're disappointed and they're angry. And, I think that there are graceful ways to navigate a question or avoid a question maybe, or an interaction if possible. But, you signed the contract that includes your media availability, and that's wins, losses, and everything in between. So I think there's like that piece of it at that high level. I think where it becomes like more interesting in terms of like leeway and development opportunities, like with younger, whether it's college athletes who certainly like don't have those kind of contracts and, that sort of thing when they're put on the microphone or that kind of situation. Or
here comes NIL.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Not currently, but it's coming. And even, youth athletes now with more eyeballs and more social media coverage and just in general, more coverage, even like, we've got Apple TV interviewing academy players and things like that, where they might not be as well equipped in those situations, but hopefully over time, by the time they get to that senior pro career, like they're ready for those moments in disappointment and in victory, hopefully.
Yeah. Quick correction. He plays for the Bucks, but it doesn't matter. They lost to the Pacers and they were
Patrick Beverly is his name.
Yeah.
He's a jerk.
4-2. He's a jerk.
Well, he was a jerk in that. I was looking at it right now, and it's like this had zero. So he.
But
was
do you think
angry.
he would have done the same thing with him if it were a man, or does it just light?
I don't know.
Do
he
the
doesn't,
optics just trigger
the optics
a little
look
bit?
bad. The thing is, he does go on to answer somebody's, and he doesn't ask that person that question. Is, do you subscribe to my podcast? I only talk to people. Maybe he already knows that the person does. But
I think when you say, we as humans, when we say something that's really dumb, and that was really dumb.
It was really dumb.
I probably 20, 30 seconds of it percolating in his head. He's like, oh, fuck, I shouldn't have said that,
Yeah, I don't know. He doesn't look like it at the moment, but I get it. Like, and I've been in the city press conference room. I've been in when Coach Carnell is not particularly happy on the day. Players, the very last press conference that they all came in and did, none of them, bless their heart, none of them wanted to be there. They had lost. They got bounced from playoffs. They were unhappy, and they all, whoever was lined up, we had like 10 of them, came in and did their duty.
Oh, they were upset? Oh, my Twitter feed, you should have seen like.
Yeah, but I certainly don't love to ask the questions of like, how does it feel to lose? Of course it feels like, I know how it feels to lose.
Right.
But at the same time, they were all professional. They were all, and I would expect no less.
Yeah.
I don't think the club would tolerate it, to be honest with you.
Well, let's shift it up a little bit. Let's ask about a win, because a win would have been probably the day that you found out like this was going to be your new opportunity. Let's kind of set the table a little bit, zoom out.
Let's zoom way out though, because Megan, as I found out at the panel, wasn't necessarily soccer first.
No, certainly not. Like I came to the game,
sucker,
pretty late. And I think, as most kids do, like when I was really young, growing up, like I think our parents put us in kind of every sport, as 6, 7, 8-year-olds, and I played rec soccer for 8 weeks and promptly quit and said not going to do that again. And then fast forward, I don't know how many years, and going into high school. I got a phone call from our, the high school soccer coach at the school that I was going to be going to, and he had seen me play basketball, like any good Hoosier growing up in Southern Indiana. Like, you play basketball, and that's what you dedicate your life to. And he said, I've seen you play basketball. I think you should come out and try soccer. I told him thanks, but no thanks on the phone, and my next door neighbor happened to be a soccer player, and some of my best friends playing basketball were also on the soccer team. And, in a small town, it was kind of welcome for anybody who was athletic to try anything in high school. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. So yeah. And I remember the first practice borrowing a pair of Copas from the assistant JV coach because they didn't have any other cleats or whatever the case was for me to be able to wear. So
we just want to get her out, or get her what she needs to play.
Yeah, exactly.
So Southern Indiana, that's Hoosier country, right? That's basketball first. Now, that being said, Bloomington's not that far away.
Sure.
And what the Yeagleys have done there at the university is, really unprecedented. So you get into it. What was the path past high school? Because obviously here you are today with the city staff, fill in the gaps between getting back into the game after a brief hiatus. What's the college path look like? Taking you into soccer as a career.
Yeah, so I think probably among a small number of people who did not play collegiately for the NCAA. So I pursued an academic degree that the university that I attended was not open to me pursuing soccer and the degree that I have. And so I had to make a decision. There were several schools that would have allowed me to do both or try to do both. And the school that ultimately I chose for the academics was not one of them. So at 18 years old, I had to make the decision to prioritize academics. And then as part of that, I started playing club at the university, and then ended up for the last 3 years I was there playing on a women's semi-professional team that was, an hour away or whatever the case was. So was able to continue playing, played in the WPSL through college and for several years beyond that. But I think, the sort of silver lining of not playing collegiately is it allowed me more time and space to explore coaching, just as a way to be involved in the game and maybe have more flexibility with my schedule and those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. So I started coaching at a really young age. And so I think that's kind of when I realized I think this is something that I really do love. And so I don't think it was probably until I had to kind of forge my own path and fight for what I really wanted in the game that I realized I really do love this thing, where before it was just kind of something that I did because it was there and it was convenient.
So where were you at this time? Where was the college?
It was Ball State University.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I was just going to ask, so your degree, so when you were coming into the halftime show, which pregame or halftime show at Y98 during City, we have literally 4 minutes to talk. It's not enough time between highlights and stats, and there's only 50, and the teams are coming back out. So it wasn't enough time to ask this question, but Dale Shilley had development City Academy development director. What is this title?
He's the boss.
Okay, he's Megan's boss. Anyway, he had told me, he had texted me on the side. He was like, if you have time, ask Megan this question. Something about engineering and designing a stadium. Is that your degree?
Yeah. So
because it's also education.
Yeah.
What are your degrees?
Yeah, it's been sort of a roundabout path, I think. So I have an undergraduate degree in architecture. So that was the academic pursuit that didn't allow me to play collegiately, and it makes sense now having gone through the program. But so I have an undergraduate degree in architecture, and then graduated and told my parents, there's no way I'm going to be an architect. I don't know what I want to do other than I want to coach soccer.
Was it because you didn't want to because I know a lot of architects,
Yeah.
because I came from that industry, because the post-grad, right,
Yeah.
the time you have to spend to become an architect,
That was it.
It's like doctorish.
Yeah, it's 7 years post-undergrad to become a licensed architect. If everything goes smoothly and you don't take any breaks and,
Oh my God.
And you have to be vouched for, and
Right.
you got to get so many hours.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So for me, it was, and I still, I love the theory and the study of it, and I really enjoyed, architecture, but I think it was something that I didn't want to wait. I felt like I was going to have to wait 7 years or whatever it was going to be.
But you
really
were
start
involved
the
in
career.
something with a stadium, you told me.
Yeah, so the Grand Park in Westfield, Indiana, if anyone's familiar with
Up north.
Yeah, the 32, it's 32 outdoor fields, and then they have an indoor facility. I was working for Indiana Soccer Association at the time that they were entering into the agreement with Westfield, and helped design the indoor facility. So it was funny, we played there just a couple of weeks ago with some of our academy teams and walking into the indoor facility. And I think Dale and I were having a conversation, and he was talking about like the building and how incredible it was. Hey, yeah, I actually helped design this.
Well, let me talk about the steel, Dale.
This might be the only one.
That's my pylon right
one
there.
of the only places that I actually put the degree
Mom
to the
and
use
Dad.
that it was meant to be used for. So yeah.
Yeah, well, that whole complex, because I guarantee there are a plethora of listeners right now that are like, yep, been there.
Yeah.
It's really kind of amazing. And they're about to add 12 new fields too, like grass fields. So all of these macro events, especially the MLS Next and ECNL events that are typically out in Coachella or down at IMG, they're trying to find space. I have to imagine that Indianapolis, that Carmel area up there, they've got to be close. Because, I mean, you've been to all these facilities.
Yeah.
World class is a big word, but it's definitely U.S. class.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a unbelievable facility. I think they've got 8 turf fields, a grass stadium field, and then I think like 28 Bermuda rye mix fields, and then 3 indoor fields, full size indoor.
Have you been there?
No, I don't think so. I don't remember.
You will. I guarantee
I don't
within
think
the
I've
next
been there.
12, 18 months, you will be there.
Yeah,
Probably
for sure.
with
If you haven't
one
been
child or
yet-
another.
Yeah, if you haven't been
yeah.
yet.
It's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of roll out of the architectural world, in doing all that. Where was the first? Okay, I'm not going to be an architect. I'm going to work in soccer. I'm going to get into coaching deep, and I wanted to pay my bills. What did the first experience? Where was it? What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when I finished my undergrad, kind of happenstance of, I found my way into education and was working at a high school and then kind of pursued a graduate degree in secondary in special education, and then worked as a special education teacher full time. And I think it was a path. I really enjoyed working with young people, and so education made sense. And then it also allowed me to pursue coaching at a really high level. Obviously, those schedules align, and it's a pretty common kind of mix of careers. And I think it was pretty early in that process, like maybe 1 to 2 years out of undergrad, that I started thinking, yeah, I think the thing that I want to do is I want to be an educator, but I don't want to work in a school. I want to coach. And I think that was, I was probably 22, 23, and I didn't know many people that were doing it in a full-time capacity. And so I spent, 5 or 6 years trying to figure out how to make that a full-time job, doing all different sorts of things, but coaching was always the through line, coaching everywhere and anywhere, and probably too much in certain moments. And then, at 27 years old, became a college head coach at a Division III school, and was able to make it a full-time thing. And then, I've continued to find ways to stay in the game.
That's awesome. So, and you made a point either on the panel or in the halftime show that, coaching is educating. You're educating players, kids, young adults, whatever it might be, on not just the technical, the tactical, soccer IQ, but it's a teaching job in a way.
Yeah, certainly. I think that is the best descriptor of coaching, especially in a youth space and even in a senior space. I think it is teaching and it is education. And when people ask what's been one of the best things that you've done for your coaching career, is it the coaching licenses? Is it all these other things? And sort of I have all of the licenses, right? And it's still the foundation in education. It's the courses that I did. It's working in school settings. It's, understanding how kids and people in general learn and develop, and what those things look like, and how to communicate information most effectively. And I think all the coaching licenses have been great from an X's and O's standpoint, but I don't think without the scaffolding to hang them on.
And translating.
Yeah.
So you can have, and I say this because I've, encountered various coaches who have on the youth part high license levels, right? They know the X's and O's, but some of them don't translate it to a 16-year-old brain, right? And it doesn't make sense to them. So I think that translation of the skill is so important. And how can you? Just a off note, whenever I'm doing like a mindset training and I got a lot of kids, maybe 2 teams are in on it. If there is a coach/parent around who is a teacher, and they're like, if you need any help, I'm like, who's the teacher?
Yeah.
'Cause there's nobody better to, one, controlling a group of kids, and two, like translating things. It's been, they're always the go-to. If there's a teacher in the group, that's the person that you want. They can translate just about anything.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think about it as like, oh, you just need good communication skills. And I think it's so much more than that, right? It's how do you layer information? How does an adolescent brain learn?
And they're so different.
Right. And so understanding what's normal and what's abnormal, and how to maybe, design a session or film or the things that you're doing it's exactly like teaching a math lesson. And I think people maybe would find that to be odd, but it's so similar. It's so similar.
Well, I think too, like, there's a certain aspect to, when you look at coaches, take a Jerry Yeagley, right, from the Indiana days, and even in my own experience, Coach Baker over in Granite City and all of the wins that he had, and yesterday we sat down with Terry Mickler here locally, and you can't win over 1,000 games in a competitive market and not have something that is well above the X's and O's, and I think that. I jokingly in my head, I always think of like Yoda, the Star Wars, what's do or do not, there is no try. And I think there are certain coaches that that just see what's going on, read the room. It's understanding the personalities of the players, and because all these kids, and we're going to get to this in a second, but when you watch the kids today, like Jen, your daughter on the GA team. All of them are technically above average, right? They're all
Correct.
good. They all have soccer in them, but it's those intangibles. So as a coach, how do you approach, because you've got your A license, you got all these like acronyms across your resume, but is there something that you try to focus on, the inner Yoda in you, that you try to bring to the field to try and find that special spot? That connectivity between the kid's brain and their heart and their feet.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And I think, again, like if you look, I think there are people who think that in terms of player development or in terms of skill sets or whatever, like that the U.S. is so far behind when it comes to like young players. And I think if you look, like the foot skills, to your point, like the passing, the isolated technique is not any different in a 10, 11-year-old here than it is in other countries or in other places, on the girl side and on the boy side. I think the question is more about like, how do you integrate that globally into the game? And that's where maybe we have room to grow as a country. And for me as a coach, like I think the most important thing I can do is teach them where to look. Like if we can do that as coaches and help them with pattern recognition and help them with their cognition, because seeing is cognitive, it's not visual, right? Like 33% of our brain is dedicated to vision. Mm-hmm. And soccer is a visual game, as much as we want to talk about it.
Soccer Mom Sunday is supported by Explore St. Louis. Now that school's out, camps are booked, and summertime is upon, be sure to check out explorestl.com for that date night suggestion or that daytime staycation when you need littles out of the house. From date night boutique hotels to daytime family adventures, explorestl.com has you covered. Now, back to the show.
Well, let me one, congratulate and point out a recent history kind of along the lines of what you're describing, and that would be down at IMG recently. In your group stage, you guys were matched up against Manchester United. Not Manchester United from Oklahoma, who just steals the name, but the Manchester United. So much to the point that the little number 10, right, that has his dad's physique, haircut, body language, everything, was Mr. Wayne Rooney's son.
Yep.
You guys won that game. And to your point, when you take the crests off of the jerseys, technically speaking, all the kids are within a very small margin of error, and moving across the field, the size, the speed, everything. I mean, it was a coin toss, and you guys came out 1-0 up. But what happens in the United States, to your point, and what we all know to be real, is at some point between this 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old age groups where we compete with everybody around the world, right? there becomes this separation. And I think it's kind of what you're alluding to. Like, how do we get to that, seeing the game better, reading the game better? How do you approach that, knowing that they are not better than us?
Yeah. And I think, it's also, I think when you think about those age groups, to your point about maybe where that pendulum starts to swing, not in our favor in some ways as maybe a country or where we're at, I think it's at a point where you can no longer be successful on an individual level and win games, right? 12, 13, even 14, maybe getting a little bit older, and certainly anywhere younger than that. Like, individual players can solve problems and win games.
Right.
And I think as the game becomes more collective, it doesn't matter if you have one of the best players in the country or in the world or whatever the case is. Like, if it doesn't fit into the system and there's not a global understanding from the group of how to play the game at 17, 18, 19 years old, good luck. And so I think, like, for me, it's really about taking players, especially with the group this year, the U15 group, who's coming from all different environments and different backgrounds in terms of what they know or don't know or what has been their focus. But to your point, individually,
right,
I think anybody would watch them and say, like, whoa, he's really good. As an individual player, maybe on the ball and pace, athleticism, like those sorts of things. And now I think for us, like, we're fortunate to have that raw material. And then it's how can we really push and challenge their global understanding of the game? Do they recognize where the space is going to be against a 4-4-2 versus a 3-5-2 versus, like, those sorts of things where a lot of players are coming in and they might know how to win a 1v1, right, but that doesn't help me, in terms of how it fits into the collective and being able to work as a group and those sorts of things. And I think the individual players that have a lot of technical ability but maybe lack some of the cognitive understanding or, like, the vision, struggle as they get older.
Yeah.
You just said something that just reminds me of the name's not important. A really good player, really good 1v1er. That is my daughter's age, and I don't know what club she's at now. And I remember talking with her parents who were getting her, like, really high level 1v1. Like, you want to talk about being able to do the shifty 6 and the super 7 and all the, like,
amazing.
You do it all, right? Yeah, all those.
The nonsense 9s.
But what was missing, in my opinion, was game smarts, right? Soccer IQ, when to use your teammates, when to not. And I remember the dad and I were chatting, and he's like, well, don't you think the game soccer is a game of 1v1s? And I said, I hope not. I said, not if you're doing it right. I hope it's like 3v2s and that we're numbers up. I feel like sometimes the training's gone that way, and I'm like, no, I mean, you got to do a 1v1 sometimes. I want you to be confident with that, but I don't want a game of 1v1s.
Right. And I think, when you look at it, I think there will certainly be people maybe that argue it, but the best players in the world find the simplest solution to any problem.
Messi has one move.
And listen, there are times where the simplest solution is incredibly complex. But most of the time in a soccer game, the simplest solution is pretty simple from, like, a technical maybe execution perspective, or from a whatever, to your point, like, is it a 3v2 or is it recognizing space or numbers or whatever the case. But I think the mistake that sometimes we make with really young players is we reward complexity. We reward at a really young age, a 9 or a 10-year-old, we reward complexity, that he did a flick and a Cruyff and a turn and a spin and a soul roll.
Yeah.
And he beat the player, which is great, but, like, maybe he could have taken 2 touches and played a 1-2 around him.
Yeah, 65 yards away from goal, and they still lost 1-0.
Yeah.
No,
So I think
or 3 moves in your own box. I'm like, not there.
Right. And as players get older, certainly, like, there's something to having, a toolbox, and that's how I would describe it, like having a toolbox with a variety of tools and a variety of different sort of, like, solutions that you can apply to a given problem. But then I think the real quality comes in selecting the right tool for the right problem, and recognizing which tool from your toolbox you can apply to solve the problem. And listen, when I played, I maybe only had 6 tools.
Yeah.
But that was enough in the position that I played and sort of with the cognitive understanding. And I played with players who had 300 tools in their toolbox. But could not figure out which tool was appropriate for which problem. And then you run into like,
think of Shaq, right? You ever watch him shoot free throws?
right.
I mean, to a degree, that's kind of what we're saying, because we get to the point and we watch these kids, and at the highest level, and obviously, Jen, you're in the same boat. We as parents have front row seats at the highest level, watching the kids compete against the Manchester Uniteds and the Flamingos and everything, and you see it. And what I notice, and I'm not going to speak on your behalf here, is that it really is the simplicity. When you look at the teams that stand out globally from a youth perspective, and then even the MLS academies that are really starting to separate, when they play, it is simple. It is you're not seeing a ton of flair, and I think there's something to that, but nobody's been able to like dig in and replicate that easily. It
reminds me of, this was years back, George and I visited Germany. He speaks fluent German, friends over there, and I don't know. I think we wound up drinking with the soccer team, old soccer team. They played and then just mostly wanted to drink Kolsch. But they were teasing me mostly about you Americans and just like you care about the one, like the one, and we care about, it wasn't even Ronaldo at the time, whoever it was, the famous players at the time, this and this, and a little individualistic, which Americans kind of are. And he's like, whoever was giving me trouble is like, we Germans don't care. We don't care about the superstars. We've got the most World Cup wins. And to their point, they're good, as you don't think about German superstars like Ronaldo and Messi and Beckham. But when it comes to World Cup wins, they've got a pretty good standing.
Yeah, they're doing all right.
I mean, they do all right.
Well, you heard
team.
You heard the quote the other day. It was Real Madrid, Carlo Ancelotti. They beat City to advance to the semifinals, and the reporter was like, that was a tough game, coach. This is after they won, mind you. Tough game, coach, blah, blah, blah. City was on your throat. They were on the gas the whole time. Looked like the possession. The second half was 80% them. And Ancelotti basically interrupted him and said, hey, you know what? Pep can go home with the ball. I'm going to play in the semifinals. And I think, so my question is, along the lines of all this kind of like bundling it up, how do you balance between, because we all hear there's 4 pillars, right? There's technical, tactical, physical, and mental. That's universally agreed upon, whether it's NCAA or academy, et cetera. How do you approach to try and find those things that are in the gap, where you can get the kids to think differently? Is it a communication thing? Is it a drill thing? Or is it like, hey, let's watch film and recap this later? What's Megan's process?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first is that you have to, acknowledge that those things can't be so simply teased out from one another, right? Like a technique without context or a technique without tactics is just a technique, right? As soon as you start to, and what we're all after, I think, is skill, which is how do you apply the technique in the context of the game, right? So a soul roll or a certain type of pass or a certain type of finish, it's great to do it in isolation and have what is perfect technique. Is it effective in a game situation? So my perfect technique might look different from someone else's. So I think the first is acknowledging that they don't maybe live in as siloed, of sort of pillars as we might all want them to in some ways. And then I think the other thing is really recognizing and starting from the foundation that the game is visual. And so everything that we need young players to be able to be successful starts with perception. And what do they see? How do they see it? When do they see it? Because nothing else matters in terms of your skill set if you don't see the picture on the field. Mm-hmm. And so I think if you start from that, and we're really fortunate at City, we have loads of resources in terms of video and a video analyst and a lot of support and assistant coaches and everything else. And so we use a lot of video. And I think starting from the visual is really important for us. And then, in the locker room most of the time before training, it's showing them clips or videos or screenshots or showing them and training their eyes off the field so that then when we go on the field, whatever we're doing in training then has more context, that the picture or the pattern or the it's already in their head, and then now they're experiencing it and they have to try to process it in real time. But I think always starting from that is really important for me.
Yeah, I mean, even on my 13-year-old's team has VO or whatever.
Yeah.
He gets to see it afterwards. And actually, I'm talking, this one's about Marin. They went somewhere for a showcase, North Carolina. And you get the video afterwards, and, you get that bird's eye view. And George was going over with her. She had a great games, but there was a moment he had identified, he'd watched, right? And he's like, she missed it. She missed a chance she's an attacking wing back, to go. She made the pass, she held her zone, but she probably should have gone. And she didn't see it. And so you go and you get the video and you take a look and she sees it there. And I just think it's interesting, you can see from above, right, the bird's eye view. But then, the parents have a view on one side, coaches have a view, keeper has a view from the back of the field, and then we can't forget the player has a view. It's like the player one view. And how do you translate that view from the top to now we zoom into where you're not seeing that? I mean, you're seeing bodies around you, but you're not able to look at it from up above in a game.
Yeah, I think that's the power of trying to, from a timing perspective, like link those things as closely as we can. And again, we're really fortunate. We also film often with a drone, so you get a totally different perspective where you can see
versus
so much
stationary
more. Stationary
camera up above.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so whether it's the huddle camera or the VO or a drone or something like that, where to your point, it's more aerial. And we also generally will film from behind the goal with a GoPro, which is a different angle for center backs and goalkeepers that you can use maybe a different sort of film for certain things. And then I think showing them the pictures, to your point, like from that game footage or from the drone or from the VO camera, and then making sure during the training session, whatever activity or exercise is designed to replicate that you find those moments to pause it and you say, okay, Mo, I want you to look, because this is what we just saw in the video. Do you see where the center back is? Do you see where the outside back is? And then where the space is in behind, right? So like trying to then link those two things. And I think there's often a missing piece there where if we always live in the training environment, sometimes it's always that player one view. Right. And I think kids when they coming into us, they have a lot of experience with the player one view, but they don't maybe have as much experience of how to integrate that into the drone kind of picture of the game, for lack of a better way to describe it, of the global sort of picture of if you make that run, look at what it does to the center back, and then look what happens to this space or that space. And so I think trying to really come back to that, like for us, like the number of times that during a training session we say, do you remember the second clip we just looked at in the video? Where was the defender or where was the pass that we wanted, right? And trying to link it back to that, but constantly trying to engage, to your point earlier, like that cognitive or that tactical side. And then it's, how do you apply the technique with your left foot to play that pass or hit that shot or whatever the case is? Mm-hmm. Can you do that is maybe the last question in the whole process. It doesn't start with the technique often, right? It starts with what's the picture. And I think like that's the best way that we found. And we also have the ability to use video in game on the bench and do different things like that, which sometimes helps. At halftime, using video clips and showing them things. And then if they have enough experience in the training environment, going back and forth from the film into an exercise and being able to translate, like now where our U15 team is in May, they can pick things up really quickly from film. In October, it was like, whoa, how many times have we looked at that clip and then we've showed you on the field, and like it takes them, sometimes weeks to recognize that space.
Yeah, you probably walked in and like, we're going to do film today, and they're like, oh, super bad,
Yeah. Let me pull up all my clips from last year and all my highlights.
Let me ask you a question, because what you're describing is really kind of, this is in the weeds. This is stuff that is all real time, and it's all super relevant. Because this is what separates teams. I would say organizations first, and then all the way down, because you can really start to see the kids that get it, that are really leaning into the connectivity between film and what it means to actually understand your spatial awareness and all that stuff, right? But what I want to do is like take you for a second and zoom you out, put you on the last row of the bleachers, you're going and you're watching other teams, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of my favorite questions. I ask this to all the coaches, trainers, et cetera, that we've spoken to. When you watch a game and when you see a player that stands out, and you give it, because I know how this goes, right? A kid does something and you're like, oh, okay, that's good. And then they do something else that you're like, oh, okay, that's good. And then usually around the third or fourth time they touch the ball, or maybe even it's just a movement, maybe whatever it is, in the back of your mind, for me, it's like, oh my God, that kid has it. What is it to you? When you watch a game, like what gets you excited, and how can you potentially describe this generic kid with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question. And I think like certainly there are people who make their living on trying to find it, right? Like all over the country, all over the globe. And, I think some of it comes from, like in any discipline, when you've spent so many hours watching or studying whatever it is, like the thing that you're looking for sometimes becomes harder to pinpoint or harder to describe. But I think for me, especially with young players, right, maybe it's different as they get older, but certainly with like young players, I think one of the most interesting things to watch is what are they doing when they don't have the ball, right? Because coming and we're fortunate at a pro academy level that there's not a question about like, do they have good technique or not? Like, I think that's like a non-negotiable, that they need to come in with some level of skill on the ball and that sort of thing. But I think what they don't always come in with is like scanning and movement away from the ball and anticipating what's coming next and those sorts of things. So most of the time for me, and in different roles, like with U.S. Soccer, I was in a role scouting and monitoring players for youth national teams. And as a college coach, again, trying to scout and recruit and project what a player is going to look like in 2 or 3 years or that sort of thing. And I think what's going to catch your eye initially is maybe something that happens on the ball, right? Often, or a big tackle or something defensively that's like really special, a recovery run or a sliding tackle to prevent a goal scoring opportunity for a center back or something like that. And then I think for me, then step 2 is like, okay, really interesting. Like now, what are they doing when the ball's not near them? What are they watching? And it's great when you're scouting female players because most of them have ponytails. And so you can always tell what they're looking at because you can see that as their head sort of flicks back and forth. Like with the boys, maybe it's harder to see, especially on film, but you can tell like
because they all look like mops.
Yeah, exactly. But you can tell where they're looking, and are they scanning, and are they trying to anticipate and adjust, and are they thinking outside of just the ball? Even at a really young age, you can start to see those tendencies. And I think when you think about scouting and recruiting players into an unknown environment that they've never been in, that's always a question. Like, well, how do you know that kid's going to be successful at City? Well, certainly we don't. But, a pretty good indicator is like, if they're pretty aware on the field and they're constantly scanning and looking around and adjusting their positioning and they're moving and they're thinking ahead of whatever's happening in the game, minimally, even if the decisions that they're making are wrong initially, we can help change those decisions because we just have to then link a decision to a visual cue that they already see maybe. When you see, going back to Mo, when you see that center back move this way, last time you stayed in the space. Next time you see that center back move, run into this channel or whatever the case is. And I think if you have players that aren't looking around, like to put it in the most basic kind of terms, it's really hard to change their behaviors because it requires them recognizing the moment and the visual cue or the situation in a game to then apply a new behavior, a new skill, a new movement. And so I think for me, especially, like, certainly that's important. And then the other one that's like maybe way more simple is just speed, right? And I think speed falls into 3 categories. It's like, what's their physical speed? So how fast do they run from point A to point B? Really basic, pretty easy to look at. But then the other 2 sometimes are more difficult. Like, what's their speed of execution? So once they've made a decision in the game, how quickly can they get that ball or on and off their foot, or if it's a defensive movement, like how quickly can they execute that? And the other one is just like decision making speed.
Yeah.
So speed falls in 3 different places. And listen, you can have a pretty big deficit in one of those areas and make up for it if the other two are exceptional. But if you're missing two of the three, it's going to be rough goes at a high level.
Well, especially in a Red Bull style high press, which City does, that mental awareness, the ability to make decisions quickly, because the general pace of the team is moving at a 30-40% clip to most teams. I mean, that's just kind of like, I don't know. I mean, that's an arbitrary number, but I know that it's more than the average team that is more of a possessive style team. So when kids come in and they, how do you, and I'm speaking to parents that are like, oh my God, I want my kid to go there. Like, talk about how do you prepare a child to start to think in terms of decisions and not just doing, because these kids, the 1v1 world that we were describing earlier is really a do world. Mm-hmm. You don't have to like make a decision on what to do because you're told you step over the ball this way through the left and touch it forward, right? So what would you say is like from a educational perspective, here's some brain tricks or training for your brain to help connect the execution? Yeah,
I mean, I think one thing is certainly like for players that are maybe outside the environment and aspiring to be there, like find environments to play in that make you uncomfortable. Whether that's a training environment or a game environment, like where you feel like as a player, maybe you're just hanging on.
Play up.
Right. If it's an age group change or if it's a team, and it could just be pickup games, or it could be playing with adults or older players, or like that, there are lots of ways to find that. But certainly like if you're comfortable in your training environment and you're comfortable in your game environment, growth can be a lot slower. So finding places to be uncomfortable, certainly playing the game, but then, I think from a training perspective, like I think there are tricks and some of it like comes back to like, and we do things in our environment, like cognitive overload training is something that like you'll see in a lot of places where it's an activity that you've got two balls, right? Which is not something that you would ever see in a game situation, right? It's a 8v2 rondo, but there's two balls instead of one. Seems really simple and it should be pretty straightforward, right? 8 players taking care of 2 balls, but holy smokes, the speed that'll break down, even 8v1, right? With 1 defender and 2 balls, like it's tough for young players to keep both those balls in the grid at the same time. So, but training your brain and your eyes to keep track of more than one thing at a time at a really young age, like, and I think there's a lot of power in that. There's lots of ways to do it, right? Like passing patterns and involve a tennis ball, right? So I'm doing something with my feet and now there's something I'm tracking with my eyes and there's a pattern that I'm doing, maybe tossing a ball, a tennis ball or something like that. Things that you can do outside of like a playing environment to replicate like the complexity and the cognitive demands. Because in a game, you're never just keeping track of one thing. Or if you're only keeping track of one thing, you're certainly not doing a lot.
Then you're one of those weird goalie things,
right.
Keep the ball in front of you.
Right. I mean, there's so many things between the ball and the defenders and the attackers and your teammates and the opponent and, everything else. And, and mom and dad giving you instructions on the sideline and
loudly or not.
Right. So I think, the more in those that you can find ways to challenge the sort of cognitive overload as you're doing the sexy 7 or the slick 6 or whatever you're up to,
you just came up with 2 names I'd never heard of.
So finding ways to like, that it's not just a motor skill now. Suddenly there's something cognitively that I'm like engaged in that process, I think is really important. And the players that have experience with those sorts of environment or have experience being uncomfortable minimally often do better when they come into somewhere like City.
So I've had a few questions, and I don't want to get close to our end time because I see his finger go to the music, and I'm like, don't do the shut up music yet.
Hey, we're in a new space here. I feel free.
So I have several, and so the first one is I do mindset coaching with kids, and I usually get them a team or even a player, not usually because, hey, let's work on something. It's always usually because something's wrong, right? We're in crisis. And almost inevitably, we talk about how, that elusive be confident, right? Which is so annoying to hear. And I would just like maybe confirmation. I'm hoping your answer is yes, that a skill on the field also is recovering from mistakes. I think it was Roman Berkey who said in an interview, like, soccer is a game of mistakes. It's trying to minimize your mistakes and take advantage of the other team's mistakes, right? And so, in other words, mistakes are a part of the game. And would you say that the ability to bounce back from your mistake in the moment, and is that a skill to develop?
Oh, it's certainly a skill.
Thank you,
And
youth players. Listen.
Yeah, and I think it's one that can be so prohibitive to growth and development. And I think that, for better or for worse, because the soccer is a free-flowing game and the players are making decisions, it's not a sport of hundredths of a second and, swimming or track and field where there's this objective measure of success. And so I think, every player at every level, like, there will be mistakes. And I think we work on that a lot of, not if you make a mistake, when you make a mistake. Yeah. So sometimes it's just changing the vocabulary for players of like, well, when you make a mistake or when we concede a goal, and the players kind of look at you and it's like, listen, we hope we don't concede a goal in every single game, but to think that we're going to go through an entire academy season having never conceded feels like we're setting ourselves up for a pretty big disappointment at some point down the road, right? So, like, preparing for what you feel is inevitable as a player, and there are going to be, hopefully not hundreds, but certainly like tens of however many mistakes in a game and at different levels. And I think the ability to move past that onto the next thing, and then, certainly the mistakes provide learning opportunities later, maybe not in the moment, but like later to come back to that. Why did it happen? Where did it happen? How did it happen? Allows you to maybe, to Berkey's point, like, minimize that mistake in the future or try to avoid it. But yeah, to think that you're going to play a perfect game, I think is setting, especially young players, up for misery.
Well, my mindset is such a huge part of it all because along these lines, and I kind of want to get your take on this. As the coach of kids that I'm about to reference, I was speaking to, one of the scouts that was at IMG recently at the GA event, and a friend in St. Louis who has their program. And they were there on the late days, and I'm like, you're one of the few that sticks around. He goes, look, in the group stage, everybody's showing off. He goes, I really want to see the kids that are, possibly in just the showcase or, they technically don't have anything to play for on that last Sunday as the flight is out 5 hours later. I want to see who can elevate at that time. And I found it really amazing. And it was, as soon as he said it, it was like, oh, duh. That's, you want to find special kids. You're not going to, everybody plays great on stadium.
Everybody looks special on day one.
Right. So I think, as a coach, when because this is a grind, and I have a second part to the question, but in those moments when it is the frustrating part of a game or a weekend or event, and maybe there's nothing technically on the line, how do you approach your team to ensure that everything matters, and how important is to you to just, take pride in what they do when they perform, or maybe when they don't perform in those moments?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and certainly we're fortunate to have players that are incredibly motivated, and I think for the most part are pretty process-oriented too. So it's not always outcome-based for them. Their sort of sights are often set much further down the line than maybe other youth players or just people in general. Like, they're thinking, what can this game or this season or this event do for me in 2, 3, 4, 5 years? So even if this game in the moment's not consequential for playoffs or for something like that, like, maybe it's something that's consequential for the next step in my career. I think that trying to always tie them back to that is really important, and remembering that, it's often in those moments when you're uncomfortable or you're disappointed or things aren't going your way, like, that there's the most opportunity for growth. Because most of the time, like, if things are comfortable and things are going well, you're probably not learning as much in general.
So my part B to this is just real quick because it's an eye-opening experience for a lot of families when their children enter into an academy environment, because the one thing that goes away that all of these kids have had their whole life is there's elevated team camaraderie, there's elevated wins, there's like, it's all pay to play. So the minutes are there and there's expectations and everybody knows who the starting 11 is, et cetera. And it's very, very predictable, but the academy world is different. So just take a second and walk through why it's different and what that looks like, so that the reason why is visited and revisited often for both the player and the parents to understand what that environment is about.
Yeah, I mean, and it's always funny, and I have previous to this role, years in pay-to-play models as a club director, academy director, like in different settings, and sort of like understand how much value those organizations bring to the game and bring to like player development. But I think the luxury of a pro environment, and certainly for parents, like if your player's in the St. Louis City Academy program, you're not paying anything for them to be there. There are no club fees. There's no travel fees. You're not paying for uniforms, for cleats, for socks, for like all the way down. Like there's no cost for them to be a part of the program.
You don't need to borrow any copas.
Nope. Nope. And so I think like there's obviously like a ton of benefit probably from a parent or a family's perspective that comes with that.
Yeah, right.
But
let's get to that's all great, and oh my God, they made the team.
Right.
Oh, let's call everybody.
And then I think,
but then the season starts. Let's talk about the season.
And then I think like where the rubber really meets the road, and we always talk about it on the front end for players, incoming players.
Right.
But I think until they're in the environment, like for families and for players, and the freedom that removing the pay-to-play piece does for us as a club, for me as a coach, for our academy staff, we get to make the decisions 100% based on player development. And there is no pressure to maintain our clients or the income from players 18 to 22 on your roster, or whatever the case is of,
right.
Well, if we don't keep so-and-so's parents happy about this or about the position he's playing or this, like they might walk, and if he walks, then these three players walk. Like there's a different level of freedom that we get to operate with as a club. With that is a tremendous amount of responsibility, because if I'm going to change a player's position at U15, I better be pretty confident that this is going to work favorably for that player, or and it's things like that where suddenly there's not, maybe parents don't have the same level of sort of input into those decisions that we make. If it's a roster, if it's playing time, if it's a positional change.
By the way, it should be nothing everywhere. Let's be clear.
Well,
okay, I'm just saying.
Right.
I just don't want any new listener to soccer to think like, oh, we have a say at our club. No, you should
right.
not.
So I think it affords us, and obviously the players are always a part of this process. It's never something that's happening to them. It's happening with them, hopefully. The parents may not feel that way always, right? Like they're not maybe as involved in those day-to-day decisions. So I think there's that piece. And then to your point about, certainly in the U15 age group and even in the U16 age group, like players are going to play in a pro academy. Like we are committing a tremendous amount of resources and energy and time into player 1, 2 in the U15 case, player 25 on the roster.
Right.
Right. And so our responsibility is that all of those players have opportunities to continue to develop. And the importance of developing maybe the top 2 or 3 or 4 players in the age group is predicated on us also developing not the top 2, 3, 4 players, because the top players will get better if the group as a whole gets better. And so I think like there's that piece of, and we have the conversation with young players, like it's before the first game, like if your goals as a U15 player in the academy are to start every game, you need to shift that goal, because it doesn't matter if you are the best player in the country. If you're playing in this academy, like you will not start every game.
You guys should put a sign on the fence that
right.
says "Go pound sand."
Yeah, and I think and again, like I think now, like after you have 6 months of the process, I think once everyone gets to see the process,
right.
I think it's different. But the first few weeks or the first few months can be tough. You're not going to start every game. You're not going to be on every roster in some cases, and you're not going to travel all the time and those sorts of things, because there's also something about developing by coming off the bench and being a game changer. Because listen, your first pro contract, you might not be a starter, and you don't want the first time that you have to come in and be a game changer.
Yeah.
To
Even
be
in college.
Yeah, in a college environment, right? Or in a pro environment. Like, having that experience as a young player is really important. Having the experience of what does it look like to maybe not be on the roster, to be in all these different roles that might happen at some time down the line for you,
Right.
and teaching them how to maximize that role for their own development and for the success of the team, I think is really important while they're young. Because obviously as they get older and move through the academy, hopefully, that changes, right? Like, that it is a more performance-based kind of decision-making process in terms of minutes and playing time and starting lineups. And there are certain games at U15 that are more performance-based than maybe other games and must-wins and things like that.
Like
but,
Man U games?
yeah, could be.
I'm just speculating.
So yeah, I think it's different, right? Like, that there is a different approach to really centering the individual player in the vast majority of the decisions that we make in the club, in a way that a lot of club teams in a pay-to-play model can't.
Well, I just had kind of an aha moment, and I think you both would agree, because the reality of the even academy club world outside of pro clubs, there is the finish line is usually the weekend ahead of you and or the national championship at the end of the season. The world that you live in, the world that these kids are in, we're talking a 2, 3, 5, 7-year window of, like, if you really look at the goal, right? It is the process and the finish line. The unstated finish line is first team placement.
Right.
So, which is polar opposite to what all these families have been used to on a weekly basis.
Of course, yeah. And I think it's, there are plenty of places in the pay-to-play model where if you're not winning in your league, you risk not staying in that league.
Right.
With youth teams, right? And that or to be in a certain platform or whatever the case is, like your goals against and goals for, and there's all these analysis and, like, should this club be in or this whole platform be in or whatever the case is. And so I think, whether everyone's openly talking about it, like, there is a pressure to win in the pay-to-play model, to keep teams in certain leagues and standings and this, and to make sure players don't leave your club and go somewhere else. And
it's pure,
like
pure ego,
right? Like, it's these sorts of things. And I think, again, I'm not going to tell you that winning's not important, right? Lutz Pfannenstiel is our sporting director. So what I'll tell you is, like, yes, we want to win at an academy level, right? Like, and winning is part of development, and putting them in positions to win is certainly part of development.
right?
But I will not be judged as an academy coach on my win-loss record at the end of the year. Like, are these players equipped to continue to move up through our academy platform? Are they equipped, in 2-3 years to be on City 2, to be pushing for first team contracts, first team minutes? Like, that sort of thing is going to be the way that we're evaluated. It's not state cup titles or,
GAs.
yeah, those sorts of things.
Kind of. Well, kind of.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah, it is a big one.
Okay, my favorite part about this whole conversation is that we didn't lead with something that I would have maybe thought we would have led with, and that is Megan is what are you going to say?
Favorite beer?
No.
Oh.
But that is good. Don't put your finger on. Put it down. He was going to do the music. It's an important question. So I would have led with this in the halftime show. I did, because we did it during Women's History Month. And Megan, are you the only female head coach in? MLS?
There is one other in a pro academy. There are a handful of other female coaches working in MLS Next across different age groups and that sort of thing. There is one other academy head coach in a pro environment who's a female.
Here we go.
There is two.
Which team?
San Jose Earthquakes, U15s.
15s as well?
Yeah. And so the reason I say that is because when we were on the panel and on the halftime show, we kind of pointed out the fact that, it's cool to honor the onlys, the firsts, and we love that. And the goal eventually one day is just to be a non-issue, right? To be like, this is like, we didn't even talk about it when we led this podcast. I love that. But that, you said something in one of them where you've coached both boys and girls, men and women in a way. And that being a female coach in their boys' environment, the acceptance level was a little different than being a female coach in the girls. And it took me by surprise when you said that. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. And I've spoken about it a few times, and especially with people that friends or mentors and things like that. I think coming, and again, I've been fortunate to your point of I've coached, U7, U8, all the way through collegiate age on the men's and the women's side. And so I think and it was from the first coaching job I had was on the boys' side. So it's not something different for me, even though it's different for maybe other people. But I think coming into a pro environment on the men's side and in other environments that I've worked in on the boys or the men's side, I have found there is less resistance, less discrimination towards me as a female or as a woman working in the game than I have encountered working on the girls and on the women's side.
I found that counterintuitive
and
when
I think,
you said that.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's, I don't know exactly what it is, but I think working on, especially where I'm at now and working on the men's side and the boys' side, that it's sort of generally it's met with surprise, whether it's from an opposing coach or players, or you walk into a room and everyone's like, oh, well, wasn't expecting that. But then I think everyone just assumes because I'm in the room, oh, okay.
You belong there.
Yeah, you're supposed to be here, just like everybody else is supposed to be here. And so it doesn't become a point of discussion ever. And it doesn't ever feel like there's an increased level of competitiveness or whatever it is, again, the discrimination. I think on the women's side sometimes, I don't know exactly what it is, but there's so much, I think, questioning and gaslighting and, who are you and what have you done and how did you get here? And
from male coaches, from the male.
Yeah, I think often men. From men and sometimes from women as
too?
Well. And,
really?
And I think more from the men, certainly, that there's more of a feeling that I constantly had to prove myself and prove my worth and prove my experience and my resume or whatever when I was working in spaces on the women's or the girls' side. Constantly having to reaffirm that I belonged in the room and belonged at the table. And every new person that walked in having to reestablish that with. And I think I've not encountered that at all.
Hey, I'm not the one bringing the waters and the snacks.
Exactly. Occasionally I still get asked about are you the athletic trainer or are you the operations person? But, as soon as they figure out kind of what my role is, then it sort of is fine. But yeah, it's interesting. I think that on the whole, my experience working in the men's game has been, and on the boys' side, especially in a pro academy, has been overwhelmingly positive with people just, treating me as any other coach. And there is no sort of competitiveness or discrimination in terms of my gender and that sort of thing in a way that maybe I wouldn't have expected, on the outside looking in. And I think it surprises people when I talk about my experience on both sides.
Yeah, it did me. And I say it's perfect timing, JB. We just dropped on the Soccer Dads pod, and Soccer Mom Sunday also does the best 11 for our high school students. And our recent one was Lauren Seppi, who goes to Naring. She's going to go be a Fighting Illini. And she's also a coach for a little 2016
awesome.
team. And she loves it. I can see her down the line being a coach and, just kind of want to keep encouraging girls and young women those ages, stay in the game. Stay in the game if you want to do that in any way and teach, because it's teaching.
Yeah, for sure.
We can teach anybody. If you can teach boys and you can teach girls, you can teach men, and you can teach women if they're willing to learn.
100%.
So in our parting shots here, I have to ask, because you come from Southern Indiana, you've bounced through the club, the collegiate levels. For the listener, because you are not only front row, you are embedded. How special is the city organization, the facility, kind of what is being provided to these kids? When you got the job and you showed up, and then your first day at work when you got to go see where you were going to coach, what was that like?
I mean, it's still every day. I walk into that facility and I look out the window of our office and see downtown, and I see the stadium and the Ferris wheel and I see the arch, and I think it's among the best facilities that I've been in across the world, and I've been a lot of places. And I think that the level of investment from the ownership group, from the fans, from the city, I've not seen it anywhere else in terms of from a youth development and an academy perspective. Yeah. It's really easy to support a pro team and a first team, and you see it happen everywhere around the world. the level of interest and education and support that we get in St. Louis from just someone in a coffee shop asking me about academy kids and academy teams and how are they doing and this, that, the other, I think you're not going to find that many places.
Especially not in Kansas.
Yeah.
Oh, there.
Did I say that? Did I say that out loud?
Yeah, you're still recording.
Megan, congratulations on the role, the time spent, the future. This has been a blast. I've had a lot of fun.
I'm excited. I knew I knew when you were down doing analysis, I'm like, that's a person I should talk to. And then I got to be on the panel. I'm like, and now I have her email.
Anytime.
And then I didn't let her go. I'm like, hey.
Anytime. Always happy to talk soccer.
Awesome.
Well, love it. And best of luck with the rest of the season. Oh, and you've got selections coming up. So I'm sure you're sleeping well.
busy.
Yeah, it's a great time of year. Everyone's favorite time of year.
Well, we'll catch everybody next time. Jen, thank you as always.
You fun.
And,
Soccer Mom Sunday now here at this building we're in.
Zach. We're
Yeah.
down at Zach. Yeah, if you ever want to creep, Urban Chestnuts across the street, High-Low Coffee House, right?
Oh, so
Right.
coffee and beer. Woohoo!
What more
great
do you
location,
need, right?
Right?
Screw the
a couple
Powerade.
screens
Ugh.
in here and maybe a carpet or a couch to take a nap on.
We're on it.
Okay.
We'll see you next time. Bye.